Welcome to this week's episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. I'm Karen Ann Bulluck, and I am so excited to have yet another amazing female executive as my guest today. So stay tuned so you can learn more about Claire Dixon. Welcome, Claire Dixon, to the Daring to Transcend podcast. Claire is the CEO and co-founder of I should have asked you how you pronounce that. That's not where I started.
Neurora.
Neurora. And a Mars health venture that is seeking to transform the quality of care for complex and systematic health conditions. Claire has 25 years of international leadership, strategy, and operational experience, including 15 years as a strategic consultant to capital and technology-intensive businesses. She's had 5 years in senior operational roles and 5 years as a deep tech founder. She holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a Master of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from Cambridge University. So welcome, Claire. I am so excited to have you with us today. I can't wait to know more about your story.
I'm excited to be here too.
So why don't you start? I just read your bio, which kind of gives a big picture, but can you just tell us, it sounds like you've done a lot of varied things during your career. How did you get to where you are now?
I guess I've had a career in 3 parts and I'll kind of walk through those. But as with many people, I think kind of my adventure of a career brings me back to kind of where I started a little bit. So I right from the beginning, I was obviously very technically minded, so pursued engineering. And through that, I had a variety of different work experience as an intern. So civil engineering, mechanical engineering, lots and lots of different experiences. And, at that young age, I found that, I was a problem. So,
I'm sure you were a good problem.
I was a problem because, I'd be given something to do and, not a lot of experience, but with gusto, I would sink my teeth into it. And so a typical day, I'm given a task to do, and by 10:30 or 11 by mid-morning, I'm like, there you go. And it's done, right? And it's done well. And so we'll come back to that. But basically having that experience again and again in these junior engineering roles, I was started to really question that path for me. And I was looking, I was obviously in the worst desk in the office, but I was looking across to the guy next to the window, the professional engineer, and, close to retirement. And he was doing very much the same kind of stuff, but his desk was closer to the window. And so I was starting to feel like maybe this isn't for me. And so when I graduated, from my undergrad, which also had a master's attached, I went into consulting. So, really what attracted me was the pace, right? So lots and lots of variety, the ability to use my technical background. So I did a lot of projects with defense companies, with technical capital intensive companies, as well as things like financial services and consumer goods. But I just loved that thrill of in a professional services organization, you're on the hook to deliver and deliver to a high quality. And that was such a great fit for me. But it was such a great fit.
There's a butt coming.
That I threw myself into it. And push comes to shove, in 2007, I started to get kind of an ache around my kidneys. Anyway, it wasn't my kidneys, but I'd managed to get myself in such a state that my back was really failing me. And so, to give you context, my typical week, an average was probably 70 to 80 hours, but it came to a head. I worked 300-hour weeks on the trot. And, called the doctor and found out it was my back. But really, needed to take months off work to recover. I couldn't sit. It was so painful. And this is like, I was pretty young, right? Like, and, I really risked my long-term health. Like I could have ended up in a chair. So, I made a change to another firm, got a healthier lifestyle. But, you asked me before we started about the cost, but like almost cost me quite significant my health. And, like I'm nearly 50 now. I choose to wear my hair gray, but, I think probably, what I ate, like my health during those years probably explains why I'm gray today. There's probably like other long-term effects as well. So like I got this amazing grounding, right? Like, so you want a financial model build, you want a PowerPoint deck build, I can do that for you in like a couple of hours. Good, right? You learn such great skills and saw, did a lot of deals, right? So supported a lot of corporate transactions, private equity transactions, saw a lot of like the investment landscape as well, like different business models, etc. And so got really good at like seeing like patterns in business. So whilst I was at the other firm, this is a complete detour.
Go around it. We love detours.
So I went on vacation with my friend Mel, and this is back in 2010. And we were in Peru, like on vacation, and on the way back, I don't know if you remember the Icelandic volcano that erupted in 2010.
Yeah.
Grounded all the flights for like a day. So we managed to get back to Spain, but we didn't get back to London. And so I found myself, in a bar in Barcelona and started talking to the person next to me and found myself pulling him up. So hence later that year, I moved to Canada. So, and I'm still in Canada today, obviously, and it's happy story. And so I was just like, great, this is a great change, right? Like sense of adventure, managed to move with a consulting firm. But when I moved to Canada, I worked for a consulting firm and then worked subsequently in senior operational roles at university. Something changed. And so, we're English speaking. So like you wrongfully assume when you're in a country that speaks the same language that communication is the same. It's not. And
it is not.
I actually, part of what explains my challenges is like during COVID, like many people, I kind of took even more control of my health and I got a formal ADHD diagnosis. And so that helped me I'm very bad at I'm very straight talker and I really don't pick up on like body language cues. Like I'm just not very good at it. So, and in Canada, obviously, people don't often say exactly what they mean. And that's kind of viewed as a little bit rude, right? Like to be blunt or direct. So,
okay.
Anyway,
I did not know that about Canada. So
a little bit softer communication. And so, that's one of the factors. Like, and I just really struggled because at a superficial level, I knocked it out the park, right? Like, like delivering on client expectations. I was brought in to do a turnaround. I was brought in to do a growth situation. Bang, 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 right?
So yeah, and I think just not to interrupt your train of thought, but I just want to pull that out because I think I had a similar experience. Although I had an English degree, not a technical degree, but I ended up being in a very technical career a lot of my life. And there is that expectation in that arena, that technical area, to get stuff done, even just generally in business, get stuff done versus anything else, right? We get things done to the exclusion of anything else. And I think it does. I mean, I had similar struggles for a lot of years where I was so focused on getting the job done that I didn't always, to your point, you'd always pick up the cues in the environment.
Yeah, and it changes, right? Like, I think it was also the career stage, right? So, what got you here will get you there, right? And so, new context, but, superficial, right? Success, right? You tell me to do X, there's X. And I've recently learned about the concept of a rate buster and how unpopular they are in organizations. And so
A what?
a rate buster. So somebody who does gets the job done and gets it done really well.
Okay.
But other people, right, who are doing their best and navigating all of the organizational stuff a bit better, perhaps, there's kind of an organizational friction. And so
yeah, I see it.
It may be hard, right? So, that to me, and it made me very uncomfortable because I didn't know what was going on, right? Genuinely, really, and so the things that had made me successful early on in my career, my assets became liabilities. And so, but it was very confusing and upsetting, right? And, obviously sometimes the reaction is to just dig in and do better, harder, try harder, and use the same tools that we've used before to be successful. Anyway, about 7 years ago, I, found myself starting to interact in the context of one of those roles with entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And a lot of them being mission-driven entrepreneurs. So wanting to have a healthcare or climate impact, for example. And there's a lot of nerds, right? And so I was like, and less politics, right? In startups, you haven't got time. You've got to focus all your energy, all your attention, all your resources on moving the company forward and the goals. And so I was like, these are my people. And so, when I say it's going back to the beginning, I grew up in a blue collar family, right? I was the first person to stay at school past 16, but my family are all entrepreneurs, right? The blue collar entrepreneurs, but they're all entrepreneurs. And so I was like, oh,
this is my roots. I'm getting back to my roots.
Back. And then, I joined Aurora as kind of the third co-founder, as the non-technical person on the team, very technical space. So having that background was obviously super helpful. And then we've been on this journey together for 6 years. And, just over a year ago, we shifted direction into the women's health domain. And with that, I stepped into the CEO role. And, I have to say, I feel like the things that were previously my liabilities now become my assets. So I'm impatient, right? I'm very driven, very results focused, but in a space where you have limited resources, where you've got to take 300 no's this week and come back for more, right?
Yeah.
Next week, you've got to have some of those attributes that in a more nuanced, complex organizational structure really don't work very well. And so, on top of that, I find myself with this global network of women and some men, male founders, who are my friends, right? Some of them from the first conversation via Zoom, because we have this clarity of the impact we want to have, and we have the same challenges, the same opportunities, and it's really empowered me to the courage to speak out, the courage to speak my truth, stand up for others. We're not in competition, right? People who are working even in the PCOS space alongside us, we're not in competition because these markets are yet to be built, right? So we're working together, and that is this tremendous movement beyond kind of our individual startups, right? So, I'm not unrealistic, right? I'm optimistic, but realistic. If we can support others, then some of us will succeed. And so the world will change because we'll start actually chipping away at the health equity gap and some of these other pervasive issues that are, really ripe for change. Like, and we're talking about, I think, women's health and PCOS with its complexity and its impact and its prevalence is like a really good one to start with. You're talking about working around a system that isn't working for people, and like that energizes me every day, right? So
absolutely. And, I love all of that. There's a couple of things that really jumped out at me as you were talking, that I want to circle back to. And one of them was the idea that our strengths and our liabilities, right? And I always say, that is one of my favorite sayings, people that know me, our biggest strengths are also our biggest liabilities. And the problem is not the strengths themselves. The problem is we overuse them. We learn what our strengths are, and then we're like, okay, I can bring those strengths to every situation. And that's not always the case. And so really our strengths turn into liabilities when we overuse them or don't use them in the right context. And I love that you've taken your strengths and found a place where you can use them in the right context so that they become strengths again.
I mean, and it also inherently, startup life, like the person you have to be successful tomorrow is a different person than the person you have to be today to be successful. And that, getting out of your own way, right? And like that opportunity for growth. In a big hierarchical organization, there's a box, and you are rewarded for performing within that box. You are disincentivized, right? And the way to get ahead is to move into a different box. Whereas in startup life, inherently there's way more to be done. There's you're creating, right? There was nothing there before, and suddenly you're creating something out of nothing. There's that opportunity to really push yourself and grow. And the challenge, right, and the cost, right, is, because you've got that passion driving you, and because you haven't got a lot of resources behind you, it's like burnout is obviously always a risk. But, I think going through that experience early on, and really kind of actually working on the mental resilience is kind of like how you counter that and make sure that, you are like an athlete, right? Like, I'm not an athlete, but like an athlete, but in business, you're prepared for the challenges that are ahead. And so I just love that.
Well, it's the same concept. I mean, I know, one of the tools that I use in my coaching practice is a framework called positive intelligence. And, it's exactly that. It's exactly learning how our strengths turn into liabilities and how to create that mental fitness, that mental resilience that allows you to adapt to different situations, get more situational awareness, be able to use your strengths appropriately and not use them when, not use those tools when they're not appropriate. And that's always, a challenge. And, of course, I think for me and my career, it was the same thing. I was really good at getting things done. So I was moved around a lot in the organization. I was lucky not to be put in a box in my organization because I just was given the opportunity to try lots of different things, which I think is one of the reasons I stayed with my company as long as I did, because otherwise I would have gone crazy, because I love a challenge and new things. But how do you bring both your skills to a new situation and recognize what you need to learn to make it better? And it sounds like you're doing a beautiful job of navigating that at this point, which I just love.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of, and I'm still working on this, but, one of the things I've realized, because I also mentor companies as well, is, one of the most flattering things is being asked for help. So like most people. And so, this was a pivot for us. It was a changing role for me. So, I am I'm a sponge. And so, obviously I have enough experience to have like a filter of like, what's good advice, what's bad advice, maybe what's good advice for me, what may not fit with me. But like, I'd say, more than 50% of my time is about sucking the marrow out of like other people's experience, and how can we leverage that to like get better, do better, make progress for the company. And also just acknowledging you can learn from everybody. I think people sometimes have too narrow a viewpoint about who they can learn from, right? Obviously, I've got peer organizations, companies that are further ahead in the femtech, women's health journey. Love of those groups. I've got team mentoring. So people who are like had incredibly accomplished careers and like a more formal structure where I'm getting a lot of, a big workout through them. But like, it could be an undergrad student who has lived experience of our like topic area, PCOS, who I can learn the most from this week. And I'm like, and I'm open to that. And I think that's kind of ultimately kind of, assuming we are successful, like, and I'm successful, that's part of it. I think too many people are very like narrow in how they want to learn and who they want to learn from.
No, I love that, because it's so true. We can get so narrowly focused on who's the expert and who we're supposed to be listening to, when we can get such a much broader perspective by listening to a lot of different people, which is one of the things I love about doing this podcast, is because I get so many different perspectives and get to learn from people. I just had another interview not too long ago with another woman in femtech in a completely different angle to it that you are. She's actually based in Singapore, and she's helping women entrepreneurs in Asia that are in the femtech space. So I love this theme of women helping women, or just us all helping each other, because our health is so important, as you learned early on in your career. Our health is everything. Without that, we can do nothing. And so many people sacrifice that. So I'm going to talk about sacrificing, because you obviously early in your career sacrificed a little bit of your health to get where you are. What else? What other sacrifices have you made along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I like a very broad definition of wealth. Mm-hmm. So wealth for me, I think there's like, I think it's 8 different components. I'm not going to name them all because I probably will forget a couple. But like, health is part of that, right? Connection is part of that. Like the things that make it worthwhile to be a human being, right? And to live our lives. Most of us, and unfortunately not true of everybody, most of us are in a position where we have food to put on the table, right? And I know I don't want to be insensitive, because there is a huge cost of living crisis going on, and like we're all feeling the pinch, and I know that. But once you're in a position where you're not desperate for money doesn't really get you much, right? Yes, it's nice, right? it's nice to have lots of money, right? Like, but in my experience, it's a candy floss. So it's like, it doesn't fill you up. Okay. Yeah. It's like, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't fill you up, right? Like it's not inherently, money and wealth are not the same thing. And like, great experiences, and it can buy you security, but it's not the meat in the meal, right? Like it's not the protein. And so, for me, it's like, entrepreneurship is like, obviously can be a really challenging path for a variety of reasons. But, like, is it as financially rewarding as like alternative career paths? For the lucky few, right? And I do believe that it's not just hard work and being right? You got to be in the right place in the right time. And there is an element of luck. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to those who are like wildly successful out there. There is an element of luck. And there's other people who worked just as hard and had just as great ideas, right? Who ultimately their companies failed or whatever. Like there are lots of people who are, equally brilliant and don't get the financial payoff. But, that is a cost, right? Like that is, losing that security, like perhaps, right? But honestly, compared to the other trade-offs in terms of things like your health and kind of, for me, I'm not a religious person, but doing something where I feel like I could have a positive impact is important, right? Like
Yeah, and I think what I've seen so often, and I talk about this frequently, when I've seen so often, particularly with women, we get to a point in our careers where the really most important thing is to make that positive impact in whatever way it is, versus just making money. And that doesn't negate making money, right? To your point, having money is wonderful. Having money is wonderful. It gives us opportunities to do things that we wouldn't necessarily be able to do otherwise, right? Whether there are our own personal experiences to help our own growth, or whether there are ways that we can help and support other people. But it's a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. And so many people get caught up in that. But I often find that women, once they hit a certain stage of their careers or a certain age in their lives, however you look at it, get to that point where, hey, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to keep pursuing money at the cost of everything else. And basically you kind of ran into that too. It wasn't worth it to you to consider because your health had broken down. And it's so sad how often we hear that. It's so sad.
There is kind of, for a lot of us, it does start to happen at a certain age. In terms of this more integration of our inner and outer lives. And so, I think structurally, we bear the weight of kind of a system not built for us, obviously. We could go deeper into that. But also weight of expectation. And as we start to move out of the baby making years, right?
Yes.
And as we start to move out of what is classically seen as the objectification, like you're a sex object, right? Like, right? A lot of the judgment about our appearance is about objectifying us. I think we start getting beyond that and start shedding, other people's, I don't want to swear on your book, other people's expectations.
100%.
We can never meet. And we start going, actually, what do I want? And who am I? And it's kind of like all of a sudden we feel we have permission to be a whole person because we're less restricted in kind of not having that anymore. We're dangerous, right? We're dangerous and we're powerful. And so that's scary.
100%. Yes. You have a
this experience. We have, not 100%, but I feel like there is this, a slightly more collective, feeling of supporting each other and being part of a community. We learn to actually embrace ourselves. And, I hope, right? I hope that, the Gen Zs or whatever in the world, don't have to wait until their 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, whatever that looks like. But, that's the pattern that I see a lot. I'm just going to close my blind a second.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No worries. They can edit all that out. That's the magic of the editing team. Okay, so I'm going to pick up. I agree with you totally that that's the beauty of the later ages of our lives. And I see the same pattern. I see the same pattern in myself, and I've seen the same pattern in a lot of my friends and other people that I work with. We get to a point where some of those expectations that are on us when we're younger disappear, and we have the opportunity to blossom, as long as, and again, this is where culturally sometimes there's this dichotomy, because we're in this place where we want to blossom and push off the mainstream expectations. But then we still have, well, okay, now she's too old, or, or our looks aren't what they were before, and people don't, we lose some of the power in that. And it becomes kind of a mixed bag at times, just because of those continued expectations that really the value of women is when they're young. And it's,
I mean, I think it's fear-based. I think it's fear-based as well. I'll be honest, right? Like, I mean, I was listening to a really interesting series about witchcraft, right? And the origins of, like, the witch trials, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's scary. And ironically, I'll challenge you. Like, I was sitting down with a friend for coffee the other day. She's mid-50s. I'm not going to name her. I'm not going to embarrass her, but she was complaining about her wrinkles. And I looked at her and I was like, you are so beautiful. Like, your wrinkles are like laughter lines, right? Like, she spent so much time smiling in her life that, like, that's now embodied
in her face.
In her hug. And for me, like, she shines, right? And, like, who she is inside is now more accurately coming out because of those, right? And so, like, it may not be, it may not be your traditional, like, Barbie model of beauty, but, like, honestly, like, that's not real. And real men don't think that's real. And so, like, a lot of these expectations, a lot of these stereotypes that have limited us are just garbage, right? Like, I think we can just throw them away.
Of course they're garbage. And even the Barbie movie, which I finally did watch over the holidays, but even the Barbie movies, basically the conclusion of it, well, not the conclusion, because the conclusion of that movie was stupid, but the real message in it was exactly that. It's not real. And, Barbie's transformation from being this stereotypical Barbie to being real in that movie was really a cool message in the way we looked at, okay, yes, there's some value in these stereotypes, right? But they're not real. And the real value in life is being real.
Yeah, it's and like, honestly, I mean, there's always trade-offs, right? There's always, but the more you can kind of, like, drift towards the place where you can use your unique kind of, like, what you're best at, what you enjoy doing, like, what you love, express that, without limiting yourself. The more you can move in that direction, the more you can kind of build into that kind of, our fundamental human need of connectedness, right? Connectedness with the mission, connectedness with other people. Like, that's surely what it's about. And I think kind of, yeah, like I said, I just, obviously I wouldn't change anything. Like, it's perfect, but it's like, unfortunately, many of us only kind of find our way, right? Because we're bearing that weight for too long.
Absolutely. And so many women I talk to exactly your point, we don't even know what we want. Which is one of my missions in life, is to help women know what they want and learn to express it, because that's been my journey. Clearly that's a lot of what your journey is. So I'm gonna just change things up a little bit and talk about, because I love what you just said about embracing your uniqueness and self-expression. And then I mentioned earlier excitement for you. For some reason, I see that as part of you. But as far as those three things, the uniqueness, the self-expression, and excitement, how does that inform where you're going next? What's next for Claire in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like, I'll give a very practical example. I have this hardcore, nerd brain commercial experience, right?
Yeah.
I've worked on hundreds of deals. I also have I've had a fertility journey, so women's health, right? I have that personal connection and lived experience thing, right? And I recognize that, fundraising's hard, right? Like fundraising, I need to throw that out there and not easy, and so I need to pour out. And I realized I kept on the seesaw of really going heavy on one or heavy on the other. I made it an or thing.
Okay.
So I was like, screw this, right? I'm a Harvard MBA, this deep commercial experience, and I have the problem. I'm like, why wouldn't you back a founder? I had that moment where I was like, people sometimes reflect, and I was like, no, I need this to be an and, right? And for me, obviously, I see that. I predict that will click into place for me in terms of I bring both those to the table.
Yeah.
That's going to really have an impact on our results. And not being, you get a lot of advice, and it's just because someone's telling you more of this doesn't mean less of this, right?
Yeah.
I think kind of trying to live as much in the and world as possible. And that's just one example, but it's, it's not being, it's an ego thing if you kind of try and cover pieces of yourself up in a way, right? It's that's an ego thing as much as showing off about them, right? So I'm trying to strike that balance to really show up for my business and kind of obviously the women whose lives we're trying to improve through what we're doing.
And yourself. And yourself.
Yeah,
of course. Yourself. Because I love that we often do feel like especially in business, we feel like we have to hide our stories, that we have to project the image, to go back to Barbie. We have to be the Barbie image in some way, shape, or form. But when you're real, then you're not only meeting people from a headspace, right? Intellectually, and I know, your engineering background, your technical background, that's a lot headspace stuff. And we need to operate. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's also a heart space. And when you tell your stories and when you connect with people on a heart level, that is as important, maybe sometimes even more important than what's in the headspace. And so I love that you're integrating the two and taking that forward, because you're right, that's going to make you so much more powerful. Yes, it might turn some people off. It might threaten people. But my guess is it's going to connect with a lot more people than it's going to turn off.
Yeah. I mean, there are always going to be people who try and make themselves big by making others small, right? There's always going to be people, it's just turning up and being authentically who I am. It's hilarious, right? People say I'm intimidating and I'm 5'2", right? I'm tiny, but that's not about me, right? That judgment is existing entirely in them, right? Because my intent, I'm let's lift everybody up, right? Yeah. I believe that human ingenuity, passion and stuff, we really do have the potential to solve some of the massive problems we're grappling with. Mm-hmm. And my intent is to lift others right up. And so just recognizing that not everybody's got to like you, right? And that's okay, because you know what, that judgment is theirs, right? It's don't take that on, right? Wear less of other people's stuff.
And Absolutely. I love that. And I had read another interview that you had done that said, that was one of your struggles, that you want everybody to like you. And I think it's a struggle for all of us. We all want everybody to like us. It's a normal human reaction. But to your point, yes, we have to own our own behavior, no doubt, and we have to own our own intentions. But a lot of times there's stuff going on in other people's heads and minds and whatever their saboteurs, to borrow language from Positive Intelligence, that have nothing to do with us. And I love, one of my very favorite books in the world is The Four Agreements, and the part about don't take anything personally. And I had this conversation with my husband just the other day, how hard that is, that to not take anything personally. But yet it's so important, particularly in leadership and in getting to our full self-expression.
Yeah. And I think classically, I think the models of leadership are changing. I think kind of we are, kind of entrepreneurial space. We are not necessarily bound by the post-industrial revolution, machines, like frameworks, right? Because it's actually hard to embrace some of these new models of leadership if you're working in that old system, which is a 1950s system, right? Like, it's like, oh my God, like we're still working with these frameworks. But I think like, we are taught as women, like, be nice, right? Like, be like, and like, I think kind of it's not a subtle nuance in Canada, but like, I focus on being kind, right? And like, yes, we all slip up, like we all kind of say things that like, or do things that are hurtful to others inadvertently, but being kind, like as in, and some of that is being courageous sometimes, right? Like things like delivering feedback or like telling people how you really feel.
Yeah.
But withholding information from people, like, like being like fake nice, right? Like, I just, what? Like, I think people see through that. It makes people like, you don't really get to connect with a real human being because they automatically like put up a shield. Whereas when you're kind of open and authentic and have kind intentions, right? Like, I think, most people are receptive to that unless, as you say, they're carrying like a lot of damage, and it's not yours.
It's not ours. And, at the end of the day, and I love how you're personifying this and your journey. At the end of the day, it's really our journeys, and it's really our growth and our authenticity and bringing who we are to the table fully and unapologetically. And I love what you're embodying and trying to do, and it's going to bring transformation. Maybe it's not going to be the transformation that you expect. Who knows? We never know these things, but it's going to bring transformation in some way, shape, or form. And maybe sometimes it brings transformation that we never ever see.
Yeah.
But
and I have to say, I have to acknowledge I'm standing with giants, right? So, particularly over the last, just over a year, like, I feel like I've had such tremendous support, like from my mentors, from others, but I've also had such, amazing role models out there in the community. I went to the Femtech Canada launch event last week. Rachel from High Ivy, for example, like her courage and like, she's emboldened me on a number of occasions, right? Because, like when you see somebody doing this and being this, that does give you the strength, right? To kind of like pass through that level of discomfort around, will this person like me? Like if I say that, like, how will that be taken? Right? Like it does definitely give you strength when you see others doing it. So, like it has a ripple effect.
absolutely. And that is a big reason why I am doing this podcast and having wonderful, amazing women like yourself on it, because my mission is to inspire women to do all the kinds of things that you're doing. Be authentic, embrace their uniqueness, have full self-expression. And I want that for myself. And, I want it for other women. So I love being able to share the story. And thank you so much for being a guest today. I really appreciated, Claire. Your story was so inspiring. And I can't wait to share it. I just want to, in closing, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about your company and your business, or you personally, what's the best way to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty prolific, so pretty easy to find Claire Dixon. Or you could look me up, Claire@neurora.com.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Claire. And I'm Karen Ann Bulluck. Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about me or my business, you can check me out also on LinkedIn or at daringtotranscend.com. So thank you again, and please join us for the next episode of Daring to Transcend.